This is podcast psychology. So think about this for a second. That feeling,
Mm,
that constant, maybe low-level hum of worrying about what other people are thinking.
yeah, definitely.
Does that ever sort of play in the background for you? I think it's something most of us, well, we bump up against it, right?
Absolutely. It's pretty common.
Well, today we're diving into a book that really, really challenges this whole thing head on. It's called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumiteko Koga.
Right. And this book, it kind of throws down a pretty radical gauntlet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks at things through the lens of Adlerian psychology.
Adlerian, okay.
Yeah. And it argues that at the very core, all our problems basically stem from caring way too much about what others think, external opinions.
All problems. That's
Ah,
that's a big claim.
it's huge.
Hmm.
And the authors make this really gold promise. They say, simplify your life, ditch the people-pleasing habit, and bam, happiness just follows.
It does make you stop and think, though. Could it really be that straightforward? For you, the listener, I mean.
Exactly. Could it be that simple?
It almost feels like, I don't know, a magic bullet or something. So, okay, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack their core arguments for you. We'll look at this psychology of unhappiness they talk about
Uh-huh.
and really dig into whether our, internal worry is actually truly internal.
Right. That's a key point.
We'll explore why they claim that chasing everyone else's approval is, well, a dead-end street.
Definitely.
And finally, we'll get into their alternative path, this idea of contribution and, I guess, a really profound kind of self-acceptance.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the central idea that all our worry somehow is tied to the outside world.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how Kashimi and Koga really flip your usual understanding. They argue that even those anxieties, the ones that feel intensely personal, um, they aren't truly happening in a vacuum.
Not in a vacuum. How
No.
so?
Well, they suggest, and this is basically a quote, that there's no such thing as worry that is completely defined by the individual.
Mm.
Instead, they say something like, whatever the worry, the shadows of other people are always present.
The shadows of other people. Think about that for a moment. Even when you're alone, just with your thoughts, are you still, maybe on some level, considering how others might see you or judge you?
That's the question they pose, yeah.
Right. It's like even our most private mental loops, our internal chatter, is often shaped by this anticipation of external reactions or judgments.
Exactly.
And from this, they land on this key concept, the courage to be disliked. Now, this isn't about being deliberately difficult or anything, is it?
No, not at all. They're very clear on that. The courage to be disliked isn't about some kind of defiant confidence. It's actually framed as stemming from a fundamental lack of courage to not seek approval.
Oh, okay. So it's the bravery to step away from needing that constant validation, that pat on the back.
Precisely. In fact, they go so far as to say, and this is pretty provocative, that freedom is being disliked by other people. It's about unshackling yourself from the weight, the burden of trying to meet everyone else's expectations for you.
Okay, freedom is being disliked. That takes a minute to sink in. So to really get why this courage to be disliked is so central, we probably need to understand the foundation it's built on, right? Adlerian psychology.
Yeah, absolutely.
For anyone listening who isn't familiar, who is Alfred Adler, and what's the sort of core of his thinking that underpins this whole book?
Okay, so Alfred Adler, he was a contemporary of Freud and Jung, but his approach was quite different. His psychology really emphasizes the individual as a unified whole body, mind, emotions, everything working together towards some kind of common goal.
A common goal, even if we aren't aware of it.
Exactly. What's crucial for you, the listener, to understand is that Adler believed all these aspects work together kind of in concert, even if you're not consciously aware of what that ultimate goal is. Think of it like your whole system is always trying to solve something, to move towards something.
Okay.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, Adler's view suggests that our goals aren't just these things we aim for out there. They actively shape who you become, your identity.
Wow. Okay. So our goals have this really deep impact on our identity, not just our, day-to-day happiness. And Kashimi and Koga build on this with the idea of lifestyle.
Right.
What exactly do they mean by that? Is it like your car or your clothes?
No, not quite like that. Kashimi and Koga explain that Adler wasn't so focused on fixed personality traits like you're introverted or extroverted.
Yeah.
He was more interested in what he termed lifestyle.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, and this includes all your habits, your go-to emotions, your typical ways of thinking, basically, all the patterns you've chosen, consciously or unconsciously. because you believe they're the best way to reach those underlying goals we mentioned.
So it's the consistent way you navigate the world, the strategy you use.
That's a good way to put it. It's your personal strategy for life, chosen to achieve a certain goal.
And they use a pretty strong example to illustrate this goal-oriented behavior, don't they? Something about an antisocial person.
Yes, they really challenge the common idea that someone is just inherently antisocial. Instead, they propose that this kind of behavior is actually a choice. It's a lifestyle someone adopts as a means to an end.
A means to an end. Like what?
Well, maybe it's a really twisted way to get attention. Or perhaps it's about feeling in control, or maybe even avoiding feeling vulnerable in relationships. The point is, it serves a purpose for that person's underlying goal.
Hmm. So you're saying that for the listener, that seemingly random anger or withdrawal you might see in someone, it could actually be a kind of warped way they're trying to get a need met?
That's the Adlerian perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
It really reframes how we look at what we often just label as bad behavior. It's seen as goal-directed.
It's a pretty provocative thought, definitely. And they take this even further, don't they? Suggesting that our emotions aren't just things that sort of happen to us, but almost like tools we create.
Yes, this is another really counterintuitive part.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Maybe use that interview anxiety example they give. That might help make it clearer for the listener.
Okay, yeah. So what's really interesting here is their assertion that essentially first you decide what you want, and then you create the emotions that'll help you achieve it.
Create the emotions. Okay.
So in the interview anxiety example,
Yeah.
someone says they really, really want a particular job, but they're completely paralyzed by anxiety before the interview. Kishimi and Koga suggest that this person might actually have a deeper, perhaps unconscious goal,
Mm-hmm.
avoiding the potential sting of failure or rejection.
Ah, so the anxiety isn't just blocking them from the job.
Exactly. The fear, in this Adlerian context, isn't just an obstacle you need to push through to get the job. It's actually a tool your mind has created to achieve the goal of avoiding that perceived pain of rejection.
Right.
It raises a crucial question for you, the listener. Have you ever felt intensely anxious about something you claimed to really desire? And could that anxiety, possibly, have been serving a different hidden purpose for you, protecting you from something?
Yeah, that's definitely something for people to think about. It shifts the perspective completely. Now, another big thing that many people feel holds them back is, well, past trauma. How do Kashimi and Koga address this? Because that feels like something that does dictate things.
Right, and they tackle this head on. They really challenge that common, almost deterministic idea that your past trauma automatically dictates your future happiness.
But surely experiences shape us.
Oh, absolutely. They acknowledge that negative experiences certainly influence you, profoundly sometimes. But they emphasize that, and this is key, not everyone who experiences trauma is stuck in it.
Okay.
The crucial point they make is that while events happen, the meaning you assign to those events, the story you tell yourself about them, that's something you determine.
The meaning we assign.
Yes. As they write it, and this is a really powerful quote, no experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We make out of them whatever suits our purposes.
Whatever suits our purposes, even trauma. That sounds a bit harsh.
It can sound harsh, but the underlying message is meant to be empowering. It means you're not just a passive recipient of your past.
So they're essentially saying you're not just a product of your history, you have agency.
Precisely. They stress that we are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. It really puts the power to the locus of control back in your hands. It suggests that no matter what you've been through, you have the ability now to choose how it affects you moving forward.
Okay. That's a very different way of looking at things than, say, traditional psychoanalysis might suggest.
Very different, yes. Adler focuses much more on the present goal and the individual's power to choose their interpretation and direction.
Right. So if you have this power to choose meaning, to choose happiness, why do so many people seem to, well, choose unhappiness or at least get stuck there? What's the strategy there, according to Kishimi and Koga, that maybe you, the listener, might be unconsciously playing out?
This is a really key insight from the book, I think. They propose that persistent unhappiness can actually be a strategy. Often it's used, maybe unconsciously, to achieve certain goals, particularly in your relationships.
And happiness as a strategy to achieve relationship goals.
Yeah. They highlight this really crucial link between the goals you set in your connections with other people and your overall emotional well-being. Basically, what you're trying to achieve and how you relate to people significantly impacts how happy or unhappy you feel overall.
Okay. And they identify two main sort of opposing goals in how we interact, right? One is trying to get approval,
Yes, seeking approval or
and
recognition.
the other is trying to make a positive impact.
Exactly. Aiming to contribute, to be helpful. Let's start with the first one, though this dead end they talk about, constantly seeking approval. Why do unhappy people often make this their priority? What's the thinking there? Well, Kashimi and Koga argue that unhappy individuals often operate under this belief that getting approval from others, maybe parents, friends, society, somehow equates to being good.
Like externally validated as good?
Right, and they mistakenly think that this external validation is the golden ticket, that that's what will finally make them happy.
But the authors really challenge this very idea, don't they? This notion that constantly seeking approval is some kind of natural, necessary human drive within you.
They do, strongly.
Yeah.
They explain that while sure, you might feel a little jolt of satisfaction when someone approves of you,
Yeah, it feels good for a moment.
it's not the approval itself that creates lasting happiness for you. Instead, that approval often taps into a deeper need, one probably stemming from those early experiences of reward and punishment conditioning. You've basically been trained to link approval with feeling okay or safe.
Ugh. So it's more like scratching an itch that was created by our upbringing rather than fulfilling a core need for happiness itself.
That's a great way to put it. It satisfies a conditioned need, not a fundamental one for well-being.
Okay. And what's the downside then? What's the heavy price they talk about that you pay when you make seeking this approval your main focus in life?
Well, the price, they argue pretty forcefully, is that you end up sacrificing your own freedom and ultimately your own
How
happiness.
so?
Because when you're constantly trying to please everyone around you to win their approval, you inevitably end up living according to their expectations, not your own values. You're constantly course correcting based on what you think they want.
Hmm.
As they put it quite powerfully, something like, to live one's life trying to gauge other people's feelings and being worried about how they look at you, to live in such a way that others' wishes are granted, is a very unfree way to live for you.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting, constantly trying to read minds and anticipate what everyone else wants from you. And it's also, realistically speaking, a completely impossible goal, isn't it? You can't please everyone.
Exactly, that's the inherent flaw. Approval hinges entirely on meeting other people's expectations. And as you know, those expectations are constantly shifting, they're often contradictory, and they're completely beyond your control anyway.
Right.
So no matter what you do, you simply cannot guarantee that everyone will like you or approve of your choices. It's a setup for failure.
Okay. So, for you, the listener, what happens when this never-ending quest for approval inevitably fails? Because it has to fail sometimes. How do unhappy people tend to react in that situation, according to the book?
Kashimi and Koga outline a couple of common reactions or maybe strategies you might recognize. One is to just give up, to stop trying to get approval altogether.
Just throw in the towel.
Yeah, but crucially, they often then create negative emotions, things like fear or self-pity or even self-hatred almost, to justify this decision to themselves. Like, see, I can't get approval anyway.
So even in giving up, they're still trapped by it.
Exactly. They haven't truly let go of the desire for approval. They've just become more deeply entrenched in their unhappiness because they can't attain it. They're still controlled by that unattainable goal.
Okay, that's one reaction. What's the other?
The second strategy they often see is people convincing themselves that they are somehow inherently flawed, that there's something fundamentally wrong with them that makes it impossible for others to like or approve of them.
Oh, that sounds painful.
It is. This allows them to avoid the risk of further rejection. If I'm already flawed, I don't have to try. But it traps them in a really damaging cycle of low self-worth. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for you.
And this need for external approval, it doesn't just mess with your internal state, your own happiness, right? It also damages your relationships with others.
Absolutely. It has a huge impact on relationships. One major way it harms them is by breeding a competitive mindset.
Competitive how?
Well, unhappy people, those really focused on approval, often see life, and especially relationships, as a kind of zero-sum game.
Meaning?
Meaning they feel like someone else's success, someone else getting praise or attention, somehow diminishes their own chances of getting that coveted approval.
Ah, like there's a limited amount of approval to go around?
Pretty much.
Huh.
And this can lead to resentment, envy, and a real inability to genuinely celebrate the achievements of the people around you.
That sounds pretty lonely.
It is. And the second way it damages relationships is through this underlying belief that relationships are all about sacrifice and entitlement.
Sacrifice and entitlement. Explain that a bit.
Because unhappy people often feel like they're constantly bending over backwards,
Mm.
sacrificing their own needs, and wants to meet others' expectations to get approval, remember.
Right.
They then become resentful when those around them don't automatically reciprocate in the exact way they expect. There's this feeling of, I did this for you, so you owe me that.
Ah, okay. You mentioned an example earlier to really nail this down for our listeners, something about a birthday party.
Yes, exactly. Imagine you go all out, throw a huge surprise birthday party for a friend, lots of effort, lots of expense.
Okay.
But then you feel incredibly hurt, maybe even deeply offended, when that friend doesn't do the exact same grand gesture for your birthday later on.
Right, I can see that happening.
The person who organized the party, in this Adlerian view, wasn't truly acting out of pure generosity or contribution. They were likely using the gesture, perhaps unconsciously, as a way to elicit a specific response, to earn approval or future reciprocation. They felt entitled to that exact payback.
And when that expectation isn't met.
Resentment quickly builds up. The relationship suffers because it wasn't based on genuine connection or contribution, but on this transactional, approval-seeking dynamic.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty clear picture for you, the listener, of why constantly seeking approval seems to lead to unhappiness and unhealthy relationship patterns. It's this unfree, exhausting, ultimately impossible pursuit.
That's the argument, yes.
So let's pivot. What's the alternative path? What's the way towards happiness that Kashimi and Koga propose for you?
Their alternative really centers on this powerful idea of contribution.
Contribution, okay.
Happy people, they argue, instead of chasing after approval, focus their energy on helping others, on being useful, on making a difference in some way, big or small.
So it's an outward focus, but not for validation.
Exactly. For them, happiness isn't something you get from others' opinions. It comes from an internal, genuine belief that you are making a positive impact, that you have value to your community or the people around you. It's a sense of usefulness.
And when you genuinely feel like you're contributing, like you're useful,
Mm.
what happens to that nagging need for external recognition, the one we talked about being so problematic?
Kishimi and Koga argue that when you have that true sense of contribution, that feeling of, I am useful to someone, that need for external validation simply, well, it fades away. It loses its power.
It just disappears.
Largely, yes. As they write it, something like, a person who is obsessed with the desire for recognition does not have any community feeling yet. Community feeling is this sense of belonging and contribution. When you have that, the desperate need for individual recognition diminishes.
Okay.
It's about finding intrinsic value in your actions, in your being helpful, rather than constantly looking over your shoulder for that external pat on the back.
Now, I can imagine some listeners might be a bit skeptical about this helping others idea. Does it always have to be some grand, selfless, sacrificing gesture for you? Does it mean becoming a doormat?
No, not at all. And Kishimi and Koga are careful to explain this. Helping others isn't necessarily some purely altruistic, self-sacrificing act. It actually brings a deep sense of personal fulfillment to you.
Ah, so it benefits the helper too.
Absolutely. And this personal fulfillment, this feeling of being useful and connected, is a much stronger, much more sustainable motivator for positive action than just trying to be seen as good in order to get approval.
That makes sense, because just trying to look good is still about external validation.
Precisely. In fact, they even suggest that the very desire to be seen by others as a good person can be just another subtle form of seeking that external approval we're trying to move away from. True contribution is felt internally.
That's a really interesting distinction for you to consider. Is my good deed about feeling useful or about being seen as useful?
Exactly. And they also touch on this really powerful, maybe even radical idea that simply by existing, you have value. You contribute just by being here.
Just by existing. How does that work?
Well, they propose that simply by being alive, you inherently bring something, maybe joy or connection, to others through our fundamental human bonds. Building on this, happy people tend to operate from the belief that all humans have inherent value, regardless of their achievements, productivity, or perceived flaws.
And everyone has value.
Yes, and this allows for a deep sense of self-acceptance within you. Even with your imperfections, even on days you don't achieve much, your very presence is valuable to those around you, to your community. You belong.
That's a much gentler way of looking at self-worth than tying it to constant performance or approval.
Much gentler and arguably much more stable.
Okay, and how does this shift in perspective, believing in inherent value and focusing on contribution, how does that affect how happy people view the success of others around them? We talked about the competitive mindset before.
Right. So unlike unhappy people who might feel threatened, envious, or diminished when others succeed because they see it as less approval for them,
Yeah.
happy people, operating from this contribution mindset, genuinely celebrate others' success. Because they believe in the inherent value of everyone, another person's achievements don't diminish their own worth in any way.
So it's not a competition.
Not at all. It's more like, great, they're contributing to the whole community benefits. There's no sense of scarcity or competition or worthiness.
Okay. And finally, they really emphasize the importance of focusing on the present moment for you. How does that connect with this whole picture of contribution and happiness?
Well, Kishimi and Koga believe that you have the ability to choose happiness, to feel contribution in any given moment. They clarify that finding happiness through contribution isn't about waiting for some huge future achievement or finally getting that ultimate recognition.
It's not about the destination.
It's much more about finding meaning and joy in the journey, in the everyday act of being useful, of connecting, of engaging with your tasks right now. That way, even if life were to end unexpectedly tomorrow,
Hmm.
there's a sense that it wasn't wasted, that you lived meaningfully today through your contributions, however small they seemed. The value is in the doing and the being right now.
So if we really try to boil it all down for you, the listener listening right now, what's the absolute core takeaway from the courage to be disliked? What's the one thing to hold on to?
I think the central message for you is this. Lasting happiness isn't something you're going to find hiding in the opinions of other people. It just isn't there. It comes from, first, accepting the fundamental truth that not everyone is going to like you or approve of you, and that's actually okay. It's freedom.
Accepting that reality.
Yes. And second, having the courage to live your life according to your own values, focusing your energy on actively contributing to the well-being of those around you, finding joy in being useful. It's really about liberating yourself by intentionally letting go of that deep-seated, often exhausting need for external validation.
Letting go of the need for approval, embracing the courage to be disliked, which really means the courage to be yourself, and focusing on contribution.
That's the heart of it, yeah.
That's a really powerful message for you to take away. So maybe as you're reflecting on all this, think about one specific area in your life right now where that fear of disapproval, that worry about what others might think, where it might be holding you back.
Good question to ask.
And then ask yourself, what small, maybe even slightly uncomfortable step could you take today or this week to act more in alignment with what you truly believe is good or right, regardless of potential criticism or lack of applause?
Yeah. What would that look like?
It's definitely something valuable for you to ponder, a small step towards that freedom they talk about.